What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my final thoughts ahead of the Game Week 32 deadline. So I'm going to talk through the latest double Game Week announcement that we had today, go through some of the press conference information, and then answer some of your questions as well. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Let's get into it. All right, let's start with the latest double Game Week announcement. It's now been confirmed by the Premier League that both Chelsea and Spurs will double in Game Week 35, not Game Week 36. It was basically going to be one or the other. So that leaves Chelsea in Game Week 35 with a double of Villa away and Spurs at home. And for Spurs, it's Arsenal at home and Chelsea away. So on paper, it's not the greatest double game week. It's not like what you would hand pick, of course, but it's still an extra fixture over everyone else. And both Chelsea and Spurs will double in Game Week 37 as well. Now, at the moment, nothing has been confirmed past Game Week 35. But at this point, it's safe to assume that any other fixture that needs to be rearranged should go into Game Week 37. So that will leave 6 teams with a double: Newcastle United, Man City, Brighton, and then Chelsea and Spurs. So Chelsea and Spurs will have 5 fixtures between Game Weeks 35 and 37. Some teams will have 4, everyone else will have 3. So there is extra games there, even if, as you kind of look at it right now, you probably don't want 3 from Chelsea, 3 from Spurs. You might do when you get to Game Week 35. Now, what does this change for FPL? Not a lot, really, in terms of chip strategy. For a lot of people, you've probably just used your wildcard in 30 or 31. If not, you're probably saving it until Game Week 35. And with this announcement, you're still wildcarding in Game Week 35. Does it make wildcard 35 slightly worse? A little bit, because if the double for Chelsea and Spurs had gone into 36, you could have maybe played triple Man United, triple Newcastle if you wanted to, against Sheffield United at home and Brighton at home in Game Week 35, and bench some of your Chelsea and Spurs players, and then the next week they would have had 2 fixtures. This way round means that you're probably not going to be able to play 6 players from United and Newcastle, because you're going to focus on having 5 to 6 Chelsea Spurs players in your 11, and then the following week, in Game Week 36, Chelsea got West Ham at home, and Spurs have got, let me just double check here, can't find them. Where are they? Why can't I? Oh yeah, Liverpool away, right? So it's not necessarily the greatest fixture, but honestly, like, a lot of people are going to be in the same situation. If they want to go all in on Chelsea and Spurs, they're going to have to do that by Game Week 35. And with the wildcard, you just get to do it straight away in one move. So is it a slight disadvantage in that regard? Maybe. But in some ways, wildcard 35 is now slightly better. Because if someone was planning to free hit in 34 and then adjust to getting double game week players in afterwards, well, now they've got one less transfer to do it. So it hasn't really changed that much. If you were planning to wildcard in 35, that's still what you were doing. If you were planning to free hit in 34, that's still what you're doing. The only thing to kind of keep in mind is, if you want more Chelsea and Spurs players, you've only got 1 week to do it after the double in 34, and that's in 35 itself. Obviously, you could just bring in a few more before 37, but ideally you would get the extra fixture. And if you've got no chips, then again, it's still the same, right? Because Chelsea have got Arsenal away in 34 and Spurs have got a blank. You've just got 1 less week afterwards to start loading up on these players. But I really don't think it's going to be the end of the world. So it has now been confirmed. When will we find out about double game week 37? Not 100% sure, but given that it's 2 weeks after game week 35, hopefully we'll find out in the next week or two. But as I said, it's pretty much safe to assume that those 6 teams I mentioned, Chelsea, Spurs, Man City, Man United, Newcastle United and Brighton, will all double in Game Week 37. We'll talk more about which players to target from these 2 teams as we get closer to Game Week 35. I think there's a question about Chelsea later on as well, but for now, that is the announcement. All right, let's get into some of the press conferences. And Mikel Arteta was asked about Saka again today, and he said, "We will know with our training session in a few hours. We will know whether he is fit or not." So he's not given anything away. He hasn't confirmed that he's definitely going to be back for Brighton away, bearing in mind that Saka wasn't even in the squad for Arsenal against Luton. But there was a bit more to his answer, because somebody asked whether or not he was worried about Saka for the end of the season and burnout and stuff like that. And this is what he said. "I'm super positive. I think he's going to fly and be so decisive. Because he's so strong, how much he wants it. When you talk to him and how excited he is about what is coming, he wants to be there. He's getting better and better. It's normal to have little niggles. You have kicks, and he's gone through a lot of that in the last 2 or 3 years, and look at the way he's performing." And then he went on to say about we will see whether he's fit or not later on. in some ways, given how positive Arteta is about Saka, it's making me think maybe he's not going to play. Because Arteta does play kind of mind games with team news and stuff like that. But I don't know. I just still stand by the fact it was a full rest against Luton. Players like Rice weren't in the starting 11 either. It's only a minor injury. It's not something major or anything like that. He's been managing it already. I just think he's going to be back for Brighton. So for anyone thinking of selling him, if you're not free hitting in 34, i.e. you want Arsenal players for their double, I would just keep hold of him and hope that he starts against Brighton, especially if you've got a good first sub, and then reassess closer to the time. The only way I'd sell him is if you're free hitting in 34, and obviously after 34, Saka is a little bit less valuable because Arsenal won't have any more doubles. It doesn't mean he has to go from your team, but he's a little bit less valuable. But for most other people, I'm still saying what I've said all week. It's probably worth just keeping him. So Man City next, and Pep Guardiola was asked whether Haaland and De Bruyne will be back in the team against Crystal Palace. They were in the squad against Villa in game week 31, but they didn't come on and play any minutes at all. They just stayed on the bench. This is what he said. I don't know yet. We are playing at 12:30 and played just 2 days ago. I have to think. I'll stand by what I said the other day. I'd be shocked if Haaland is not back in that first 11. Yes, Pep will pick the team that he thinks will win the game, right? And he's not afraid to make big decisions like leaving Haaland out. But for him to miss 2 games in a row, I just don't think that's going to happen. De Bruyne I'd be a little bit less shocked at if he missed out because I do think they're managing him. But presumably he'll be back in the 11 as well. I don't think he's a great FPL pick at the moment anyway. But if you've got Haaland, surely he's going to start. It is the early kickoff like Pep said, so we should get a leak anyway. So keep an eye on the deadline stream tomorrow. He went on to talk about other injuries. He said Ederson is much better and maybe will be on the list. So Ederson's probably going to be back in the squad. I wouldn't be looking at buying Ortega right now. Probably wouldn't buy Ederson either. I'd wait to see, that he gets a start and then maybe buy him for the next game. And then on Ake and Walker, they're both out. So if you're looking for a Man City defender, I think really it's a Kanji or Vardio in terms of price. I mean, Ruben Dias shouldn't be completely ignored, but he is a bit more expensive. The reason that I still prefer Vardio is because obviously he's left-footed and plays on the left and Ake's out, whereas Stones could be back at some point and get minutes. And I think once that happens, there is more chance of Akanji missing out than Vardio. Not a guarantee. They could play Akanji, Stones, Diaz and Vardio, right? Pep is not against playing centre-backs, but if Rico Lewis was to get a game and Stones plays, then it's one of Akanji or Diaz, and then obviously Vardio on the left still. So, I mean, Akanji can play left-back. It has happened. So I wouldn't completely rule it out. But they're the two that I would look at, Akanji or Vardio. And if I was buying one, it'd probably be Vardio. Do you need a Man City defender? I mean, that's questionable because at some point they'll probably get rotated. They always find a way to concede. But Palace away, Luton at home, 32 and 33 is pretty good. Then it's Brighton away and Forest away in 34, 35. I mean, 3 away games in the next 4. Very little upside in terms of attack. I think they're okay for a short-term move, like if you're dead-ending into 34 and you've got a spare transfer, or maybe you're wildcarding or something like that, because obviously they will have a double later on in 37. But by that point, who knows who knows who's going to be fit and available, and that could just mean even more rotation. So Akanji or Vardio, if you're looking one, but I don't know, long term I just feel like they're always a headache. So Ange Postecoglou pretty much ruled Richarlison out of game week 32. This is what he said. Richie's had a bit of a nibble at his knee, so we'll probably give him this weekend off just to get totally over it and hopefully be ready for Newcastle next week. So it does look like he's going to miss the Forest game completely. Obviously, in the last 2 games, he has come on, but the minutes he's had have been pretty minimal, especially when Spurs were obviously trying to win the game. So there's definitely something wrong there. Will he be back for game week 33? We'll have to see. But the fact that Spurs are also blank in 34 probably means for a lot of people that still own Richarlison, it's probably time to sell him. Like if you've got a squad where you're happy with your other 7 attackers and you can just bench Richarlison, I guess you can reassess ahead of game week 33. But with that blank, there's not a huge amount of upside. And even if he is ready for 33, it's not a guarantee that he will start. So I just think at this point you're probably getting rid. Who do you buy? That really depends on your chip strategy as always. But obviously Foden looking great. Diaz at Liverpool. Saka still, if you don't own him, you could buy. Son obviously great. Depends how much money you've got to spend. Players like maybe Sarabia, although I'll come on to Wolves in a minute. Eze has obviously got a double in 34 as well. So there are options you could go for. But at this point, it just doesn't look great for 32. Probably not. Well, I won't say probably not going to play 33, but there's a chance he doesn't. or at least comes off the bench again, and then it's a definite no game in 34. That's a blank. The other thing is, what does that mean for other players for Spurs? So Brennan Johnson, Werner are going to get more minutes, but Son will play number 9 again. There's no one else that's going to play in that role. So that makes him a lot better for Forest at home. I think with Son, most people have probably already made their decision on him. You either got rid of him last week or you've held on. So you can probably still go without him this week if you don't have him. Or, of course, if you're like me and you have got him, you're keeping hold of him. It's a really good fixture. And it probably boosts his captaincy potential a little bit as well. I think most people are going to go Palmer after last night, maybe Salah or Haaland, and kind of forget about Son. But I still think he's a really good option. But either way, with Richarlison, he's probably out for this week. So as I've just mentioned them, let's talk about Wolves next. So Gary O'Neill confirmed that Craig Dawson and Hwang Hee-chan may be in tomorrow's Wolves squad against West Ham at home, both due to be reviewed after today's training session. So it doesn't mean they're going to start, but I do think Hwang is interesting ahead of that double in game week 34. If you're looking to bring a Wolves midfielder in, can you delay that another week just to see what the minutes are like in game week 32? Because if he's on the bench and he comes on, then there's a good chance he starts against Forest away in 33, and then you've got that double in 34. And I do think I would prefer, if they get similar minutes, Hwang to someone like Sarabia. I mean, we've kind of forgotten how good Hwang was at one point. I know a lot of us bought him in for game week 26 against Sheffield United, and obviously he went and got injured. But there is a really good FPL pick in there, and he's going to be a differential at this point because not many people will have held on to him this long. The other thing is whether Sarabia is still a good pick, because Cunha's back now. Obviously, Hwang is going to be back soon. Probably not going to start this week, but soon enough. I think Sarabia will continue playing, but maybe it dents his appeal a little bit, especially if someone like Ait Nuri is going to play in more of an attacking role rather than at left back. I presume that Sarabia will keep playing. Like, if you look at this lineup, for example, this was Wolves versus Fulham. Like, this is when Neto was fit. Sarabia still played with Ait Nuri left back, but against Burnley in the last match was more of a, I guess, 4-4-2, 4-4-1-1, right? Whatever you want to call it. But Ait Nuri was left midfield rather than left back. Now, if they play this again, could just Hwang and Cunha be up front and Sarabia to come out of the team? You'd assume that he would play instead of someone like Doherty, right? So I think Sarabia is still a pretty good pick. I'm just less sure that he's as good a pick as he maybe was last week. But at his price, if you need a really cheap enabler to then have a double in 34, I still think he's probably worth going for. But if you can put this Wolves pick off for another week, Hwang might be a nice differential. All right, Aston Villa next. And Unai Emery confirmed that Jacob Ramsey will be out for the rest of the season. So not great news for him or Aston Villa, but not massive implications from an FPL point of view. He also said a decision on the availability of Emi Martinez and Ollie Watkins will be made tomorrow. So neither of those players have been completely ruled out of the Brentford game, but neither of them are definitely available either. Now, with Ollie Watkins in particular, we've been here before, right, where a decision is going to be made. We think he's a bit of a doubt. We take him out and then he starts. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does play because he just doesn't miss many games. It's a bit like Bruno Fernandes in that regard. So if you've got him and you don't have the spare transfer to get rid of him, I think it's probably an okay decision to play him. But if you have got a spare transfer or you can take him out as part of a hit to get in another better player elsewhere, I kind of like just selling him, to be honest, because even though I think there's probably a chance he does start, it's not a guarantee. And then in game week 33, you run straight into Arsenal away, which is a really tricky fixture. Like, I like Bournemouth at home in 34, but then it's Chelsea at home in 35. So I think if this was like, if Watkins had been fully fit the whole time and there was no issues there, you could probably make a case for keeping hold of him. Brentford and Bournemouth at home in the next 3 game weeks. But it could be a benching against Brentford, an Arsenal away game, and then a good game against Bournemouth. And in 3 game weeks' time, who knows what the kind of lay of the land in terms of FPL looks like. So I think for most people, once you've sold Watkins, you're probably just going to go without him for the rest of the season. I think it's probably fine to do that. Like, if you really want to keep him for 34 and you've got 7 other attackers you're happy with, then fair enough. But I just think with that Arsenal away game, I probably would start to look to get rid. I think Emi Martinez has probably got much lower ownership. And I think in that situation, because it's a goalkeeper, if you've got another playing goalkeeper, I would just go with them instead. If you're in a position where Martinez is your only playing keeper, then again, maybe you can just take a hit to get rid of for someone like Raya if you need a double game week goalkeeper for 34, Pickford if you need someone cheaper, Jose Sarr, etc., players like that. But I think Martinez is probably a little bit less of an issue for most people. But yeah, for Watkins, I mean, I've sold him, I guess, so I'm a little bit more biased. But I just think with what's coming up, there's only 3 forward spots. Watkins is probably not part of the best 3 at the moment. All right, let's get into some of your questions. So is an Everton defender a good pick ahead of double game week 34? And I think the answer is yes. Because of their price, they're definitely benchable in tougher fixtures. And if you look at what they've got over the next 3 game weeks, it's Burnley at home this week. I'd be more than happy to play an Everton defender in that fixture, especially if you need to make a transfer with double game week 34 in mind. And in 33, it's Chelsea away, so preferably you'd bench them then. And then they've got 2 home games against Forest and Liverpool. Now, I don't for 1 second expect a clean sheet against Liverpool, but we know Everton will be up for that game. They will try and make it difficult. And the Forest at home game is pretty decent. So I quite like Everton defenders. You've got Mikolenko at 4.6. Tarkowski is the same price. Branthwaite, if you need someone a little bit cheaper, at 4.3. They're probably the 3 to look at. The other option is, of course, Ait-Nouri, who I mentioned on my team selection video earlier. They've got West Ham at home this week, Wolves, which isn't as easy as Burnley at home on paper, but I still don't think it's that bad. And Ait-Nouri can be pretty attacking. It's Forest away in game week 33, which is better than Chelsea away. And then it's Arsenal at home and Bournemouth at home in the double. So both Wolves and Everton have got a pretty tricky fixture in 34 and then 1 decent one. So I actually think if Ait-Nouri keeps his place, then I'd probably prefer him. Is he going to continue to play in an advanced role? Not necessarily, but even at left back, as I've said, he will get forward. So I think if it's a choice between Everton and Wolves defender, I'd probably go Ait-Nouri for that attacking upside. But I do think the Everton defence is better. They've put up pretty good numbers for a lot of this season. And obviously Burnley at home is a fantastic fixture. And then Forest at home is just as good as Bournemouth at home in the double. So I think it all depends on how many attacking returns or how attacking Ait-Nouri plays. If he gets the minutes and he is getting forward, I definitely prefer him. I guess what I'm trying to say is the Everton defenders maybe a little bit safer in terms of you know what you're getting. But for me, if I was buying one, I'd probably go for Ait-Nouri. So Everton defender, a good pick, yes. But it depends. Like if it was Ait-Nouri and an Everton defender, fair enough. But I'd probably go for the Wolves man instead, I think. Let me know in the comments below if you think different. So with Cole Palmer's amazing performance last night, is he the main man for captaincy this week? Now, I did talk about captaincy in my team selection video earlier, but quite a few people asked me about it, so I'll go through it quickly. On Palmer's amazing performance, look, I didn't watch the Chelsea versus Man United game because my son had an away match for football and it was a 2-hour round trip, so I couldn't watch it. But I looked at the highlights. What was it? 2 penalties and a deflected shot off McTominay. Was it that good? I'm only joking, right? I've seen the stats, 9 shots and 8 chances created. Palmer is an incredible FPL option. Forget about the price. He's just brilliant. And Sheffield United away is a great fixture, one of the worst defences in the league. So if you want to captain Palmer, that's absolutely what you should do. And I would not be surprised, for those of us that don't captain him, if next week we're saying, well, of course we should have captained him, right? He was playing Sheffield United away. On paper, it looks good, right? And according to the stats, I've seen the highlights only, not the full game. According to the stats, it was a great performance last night. It's basically what we've come to expect from him. So I really like him. The interesting thing is, Sheffield United have conceded 1.87 expected goals per 90 minutes this season. Man United is 1.66. The Man United defence is not that much better. But the thing I like about Salah is overall, I would still consider him as a better FPL pick than Palmer, right? Obviously, there's a massive difference in price. We're not getting into who should be in the squad. We're only talking about captaincy. And if you look at their stats for the season, so if I just go to Palmer, per 90 minutes, he is at 0.26 non-penalty expected goals and 0.28 expected assists. Really great stats, especially for his price. But if you look at Salah, and again, we go to non-penalty, it's 0.52 non-penalty expected goals and still 0.29 expected assists. So he's just as creative as Palmer, but his open play goal threat is higher. Now, obviously, Palmer scored a lot of goals, but a lot of them are coming from penalties, right? In any given game, you just can't predict who's going to get a penalty. In this match, it could be Salah, although away to Man United, maybe not. But the point is, from open play, I would still trust Salah a little bit more. And in terms of the defence, of course, when you see Sheffield United on paper, that is a much better fixture than Man United. But actually, Man United's defensive performances this year have been terrible. And if Liverpool get it right, they will go and score 2 or 3 goals, I think, even at Old Trafford. So I'm leaning more towards Salah at this point. I've kind of started to talk myself into that. But I really think it's open. Salah, Palmer, Son, Haaland. It's almost take your pick and just roll with it. I think the thing to do is just accept now that it might go wrong, right? If you pick Son, I would not sit here and argue that that is a bad pick. I think it's a great pick. Could Son walk away with 2 points while everyone else gets 10 or more? It could happen, right? And vice versa with other players as well. Like Haaland, it's almost as if we've just forgotten him, right? I think the Crystal Palace defence is probably, based on stats this year, better than Forest, Sheffield United and Man United. So arguably Haaland's got the hardest fixture, but he's also got the best goal threat out of all those players. And because he hasn't scored for 3 weeks, 3 game weeks, we're questioning whether we should even put the captain's armband on, which to me is kind of crazy because there's just too much recency bias there. And yet here I am, probably not going to captain Haaland because where possible, I will try and go for a midfielder if I can. It's almost like, I don't know, if you're not sure, just captain Salah. That's what it feels like we've done for the last 6 seasons. And then Son's got the home game. He's the only one of the 4 with a home match as well. And Forest aren't exactly a watertight defence, and Son's going to play through the middle. And also, if you're thinking about minutes, right, with Haaland, we've seen that Pep was prepared to rest him against Villa. He might get limited minutes in this match. Salah just came off early against Sheffield United, probably to prepare for Man United, and he probably will play 80, 90 minutes. Maybe he comes off early. With Son, you probably know he's going to play 80 plus. So there really is pros and cons to all of them. Earlier on, I had Son captain, Haaland vice. Right now, if I had to pick, I'd probably go Salah captain, Palmer vice. But by tomorrow's deadline, it might be the other way around. I wish I had something else I could say to point you in the right direction. But it is one of those weeks where there's just a lot of good players you can choose. And to be honest, that's probably good for the game because half the time during a season, it's very obvious who the best captain or best 2 are every single week because a lot of it will come down to the fixture. This week, there's definitely a mix. Like Palmer on paper, yes, best fixture. The Salah is still the better FPL pick, I would say, as long as they get the same minutes. So I don't know. I'm slowly talking myself into Salah, but I might even end up back on Son. I don't know. I really don't like... This is the hardest decision this week. It's very easy for my team to roll. I don't know. I'm just rambling now. Let me know down in the comments, who are you captain this week? I'm going to put up a poll on Twitter as well, because I'm interested to see. I do think after last night, Palmer will be probably the most captain out of all of these. But ultimately, it's probably going to be one of those game weeks where whoever you don't captain out of these 4, you're probably going to want them to blank. It's going to be a weird game week like that. Let's see. I'm going to say Salah for now. That probably changes by tomorrow. So is there any merit in wildcarding early? For example, game week 33 instead of 35. You can carry transfers to start preparing for the next double. Now, this is going to depend on how your team is currently set up, and I'll come on to that in a minute, but I think the answer is not really. Like, the main advantage that I can see to wildcarding in 33 is if you want a bench boost in 34, because where possible, it's nice to wildcard close to the bench boost, so less things can go wrong. But because you're going to need 2 different teams for double game week 34 and 37, because none of the teams are doubling in both of those weeks, it just doesn't really make too much sense to wildcard in 33. Let's say you only want 10 doublers for 34. So you wildcard in 33, 10 of those players double in 34. You have 5 other players that are going to double later. You've then got transfers in game weeks 34, 35, 36, 37. So you've got 4 moves to switch some of those double game week players from 34 to 37. That will give you what, like 9 players, maybe 10 or 11 with hits. That's bearing in mind, you know, or not taking into account that anything else could go wrong, like suspensions and injuries. I just don't think for most people it's worth it. The only way I would go early is if my team really doesn't look great for game week 34 because I don't have enough double game week players now and there's not enough transfers to fix that. In that case, as an overall kind of outlook from 33 to 38, it might make sense to wildcard now. But if you've already got like 6 or 7 doublers for 34, then you've still got a couple more transfers to get a few more, and then you can just wildcard out of that in game week 35. It also depends a lot on your preferences for how many double game week players you want later on. Like when I talk about wildcard 35, you'll hear me say I want 6 doublers from Spurs and Chelsea. I want triple Newcastle, triple Man United. You might not want to do that. You might think that there's not enough gains by doing that. some of the players you're going to have to pick just aren't great. The double game week fixtures aren't, amazing either. You might want less double game week players and be happy with that. If that's the case, wildcarding earlier is probably a bit better. But if you're someone that wants to go all in on 34 and all in on 35, then you're better dead ending 34 and then wildcarding out of it afterwards. So if you were picking 3 Chelsea players for their doubles in game weeks 35 and 37, would you go double defence or double attack? Now, I can tell you right now, my plan and what I'm hoping to do on wildcard 35 is to go double attack. So Cole Palmer is a lock, right? He's going to be in everyone's teams. To me, he's pretty much essential at his price. So that's one. I quite like Gusto, and if Reece James is still out at that point and not looking like he's going to return anytime soon, I think given Gusto's price and his attacking potential, he would definitely be in as well. So that leaves one more spot. Now, I don't mind Petrovic, but I'm always slightly worried that Sanchez, when fit, might get a game at some point. And there's not really any other defenders that I'd really be looking at. Maybe Dizazi or someone like that could come in, but I think Gusto's the one. And therefore, I'd probably choose Nicholas Jackson in attack, pretty much as a differential, because I don't think a huge amount of people are going to own him. So that's what I'm looking at on wildcard 35. But if you're someone that's asking this question because you want to set up now, maybe you're free hitting them out in 34, it's a little bit trickier because Nicholas Jackson's on 9 yellow cards. If he gets one more, he's suspended for 2 matches. So on wildcard 35, we will know whether Jackson is suspended or not, and the threshold will have gone up. Obviously, if I pick him now and he gets that yellow card, I'm going to miss 2 games. So I'd probably rather go Petrovic, Gusto, and Palmer if I was picking now. But on 35, I might go for Nicholas Jackson instead of the goalkeeper. Ultimately, for anyone that's wildcarding later, there's going to be like a domino effect, right? If you pick Jackson, you've got one less Chelsea defensive option, so you've got to pick another player from a different team. So it might be, let's say Gusto's in, it could be like Højlund and Dizazi or Dalot and Jackson. In that case, I'd probably rather have Dalot and Jackson. That just sounds a little bit better to me. But it's all going to depend on which other players you want to fit in and what positions they take up. But I think that's really the players that I'm looking at. Jackson, Palmer, Gusto, and Petrovic. It's really 3 from those 4. I don't think there's many other options. Like Dizazi's been pretty much nailed for a long time now. 4.9 million. I may consider him. Chilwell, I'm just never going to trust him to stay fit, I don't think. And obviously players like Sterling are just not nailed on. Like none of them, Mudryk or any of those attackers. So, and then Nkunku's just barely been fit all season. So it's probably just 3 from those 4. And right now, if I had to pick, I'd want to go double attack. But I'm not sure I'd pick up Nicholas Jackson now with that yellow card situation. So I'm on a free hit 34 strategy. Are there any 2-week punts worth looking at? Ideally with a double in 37, but that's not a deal breaker. So I've pulled up the fixture analyzer on Fantasy Football Hub. As always, if you want to check this stuff out, links in the description. And I'm going to go through this on the fly. So this is just for the next 2 game weeks. So in terms of teams with a double, Chelsea do have Sheffield United away and Everton at home in the next 2 game weeks. So that's pretty nice. The problem is when you start talking about punts, you want someone low owned. So I'm not going to say Cole Palmer, for example. So I think it would have to be Nicholas Jackson. And you just take the risk on the yellow card. If he gets a yellow card against Sheffield United, he's going to miss that Everton game. So it's whether or not you want to take the risk. Man City also have a double in 37, or they should do anyway, and it's Palace away and Luton at home next 2 game weeks. That's almost perfect territory to take a punt. But again, who'd you go for? De Bruyne, would I guarantee he starts in both of those games? No, and he's very expensive. Like Foden will, but he's not a differential. And then I guess you're looking at players like Doku or Grealish, but which of those 2 are going to start both of those games? It's just really hard to know. A Man City defender like a Kanji or Vardiol would probably be quite differential, but it's not probably that exciting. You're probably more looking for attackers. Let me just go through the other teams. Spurs, Forest away, Forest at home, Newcastle away. I guess you could look at someone like Werner or Brennan Johnson, but when you talk about punts and differentials, it's about how kind of far you're willing to risk that, because without Richarlison available this week, there's a good chance that Werner will start again. But if Richarlison's back for Newcastle, could it be Son on the left, Richarlison for the middle? It could be. I think from going through this already, there's not a huge amount of obvious punts out there. Like people are pretty clued in. They've got the main players from these teams, and everyone else is, it is a big punt. It's just whether or not you're willing to kind of take that risk. Brighton will have a double in 37, but it's Arsenal at home, Burnley away. You could look at someone like João Pedro, just back from injury, played the last game, would be on penalties as well. Not the end of the world necessarily to have to play Arsenal if it's at home. But I mean, personally, as someone with double Arsenal defence, I'm hoping for a clean sheet. But he might be worth looking at as an option, especially with the Burnley away game as well in 33. And then it's Man United, but Liverpool at home, Bournemouth away. Like Rashford didn't even start the last game. You're looking at Bruno Fernandes really as an attacker, maybe Dalot as a defensive option, but you don't want a defender for Liverpool at home. So I think the teams with doubles in 37 are quite hard to pick. I'd probably say Nicholas Jackson or João Pedro, something like that, maybe Werner. But the problem is if you're thinking about 37, you also want those players to play long term, right? So I wouldn't pick Werner or Brennan Johnson for something like that. So it depends what you want. Do you just want the punts now, or do they have to last, a long time? In that regard, by the way, if you don't own Foden, look, he's not a big differential, but he's still a great pick, both now and in the long term. So I think more about that. Otherwise, like Everton have got Burnley at home, Chelsea away, it's probably not great. Wolves, I don't mind. West Ham at home, Forest away, but obviously you've got the free hit in 34, so you don't need a player that plays that week. Maybe Ait Nuri, Sarabia, Cunha could all be options. Brentford, Aston Villa away, Sheffield United at home, Ivan Toney, perfect differential. Maybe in Burmo, maybe he plays the next game. Again, that's not a guarantee because Viss has done pretty well. But I come back to the question and just think, you're looking for punts. How punty are you willing to go? So there's quite a few options. I mean, Liverpool, Man United away, Palace at home, McAllister, Diaz, still probably quite differential. Could be options as well. So lots of options. How punty do you want to go? Only you can decide that. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. I will be back tomorrow for the deadline stream, which should start at 9 o'clock. It's an 11 a.m. UK time deadline. So make sure to join for that. I'll be keeping an eye out for early team news. Hopefully we'll get some stuff about Man City. Otherwise, if you're listening on podcast, rate 5 stars. Thanks for listening this week. We'll do it all again for Game Week 33. Good luck this weekend. I'll catch you again soon.